Okay, I think I'm ready. Guten Tag. My name is Alexander Gutenberg. Welcome to the library. Been a while since I've been back, isn't it? I finally got some internet going again, so we're going to be trying to stream here. So, yeah. Um, as you can see by the title, we are going to be reading some Brothers Grimm. So, the actual story names are, let me open these up here. Snowdrop, Rapunzel, and Little Redcap. Those are the original story names. And I decided I was going to read these today well, because Disney's kind of put all these stories into everyone's mind, but not everyone really knows the original context for them. And yeah, sure, anyone can go ahead and pick up the books from the library or whatever, but sometimes you don't want to read on your own, and I get that. So let's hop on into it. We are starting with Snowdrop. Oh, by the way, if you do want to check out these books, you can find the Brothers Grimm collection on Project Gutenberg. That's a free resource for public domain works. Anyway, on with the show. It was the middle of winter, when the broad flakes of snow were falling around, that the queen of a country many thousand miles off sat working at her window. The frame of the window was made of fine black ebony, and as she sat looking out upon the snow, she pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. Then she gazed thoughtfully upon the red drops that sprinkled the white snow, and said, "Would that my daughter may be as white as that snow, as red as that blood, and as black as this ebony window frame." And so the little girl really did grow up. Her skin was as white as snow, her cheeks as rosy as the blood, and her hair as black as ebony, and she was called Snowdrop. But this queen died, and the king soon married another wife, who became queen. She was very beautiful, but so vain that she could not bear to think that anyone could be handsomer than she was. She had a fairy looking glass, to which she used to go, and then she would gaze upon herself in it, and say, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass had always answered, "Thou, queen, art, art the fairest in all the land." But Snowdrop grew more and more beautiful, and when she was 7 years old, she was as bright as the day, and fairer than the queen herself. Then the glass one day answered the queen, when she went to look in it as usual, "Thou, queen, art fair and beauteous to see, but Snowdrop is lovelier far than thee." When she heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy, and called to one of her servants, and said, "Take Snowdrop away into the wide wood, that I may never see her any more." Then the servant led her away, but his heart melted when Snowdrop begged him to spare her life, and he said, "I will not hurt you, thou pretty child." So he left her by herself, and though he thought it most likely that the wild beasts would tear her in pieces, he felt as if a great weight were taken off his heart when he had made up his mind not to kill her, but to leave her to her fate, with the chance of someone finding and saving her. Then poor Snowdrop wandered along through the wood in great fear, and the wild beasts roared about her, but none did her any harm. In the evening she came to a cottage among the hills, and went in to rest, for her little feet would carry her no further. Everything was spruce and neat in the cottage. On the table was spread a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates, 7 little loaves, and 7 little glasses with wine in them, and 7 knives and forks laid in order. And by the wall stood 7 little beds. As she was very hungry, she picked a little piece of each loaf, and drank a very little wine out of each glass. And after that she thought she would lie down and rest. So she tried all the little beds, but one was too long, and another was too short, till at last the 7th suited her, and there she laid herself down, and went to sleep. By and by in came the masters of the cottage. Now they were 7 little dwarfs that lived among the mountains, and dug and searched for gold. They lighted up their 7 lamps, and saw at once that all was not right. The first said, "Who has been sitting on my stool?" The second, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who has been picking my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been meddling with my spoon?" The fifth, "Who has been handling my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking my wine?" Then the first looked round, and said, "Who has been lying in my bed?" And the rest came running to him, and everyone cried out that someone had been upon his bed. But the 7th saw Snowdrop, and called all his brethren to come and see her. And they cried out with wonder and astonishment, and brought their lamps to look at her, and said, "Good heavens, what a lovely child she is!" And they were very glad to see her, and took care not to wake her. And the seventh dwarf slept an hour with each of the other dwarfs in turn, till the night was gone. In the morning Snowdrop told them all her story, and they pitied her, and said if she would keep all things in order, and cook and wash and knit and spin for them, she might stay where she was, and they would take good care of her. Then they went out all day long to their work, seeking for gold and silver in the mountains. But Snowdrop was left at home, and they warned her, and said, the queen will soon find out where you are, so take care and let no one in." But the queen, now that she thought Snowdrop was dead, believed that she must be handsomest lady in all the land, and she went to her glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me, who?" And the glass answered, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land, but over the hills, in the greenwood shade, where the 7 dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the queen was very much frightened, for she knew that the glass always spoke the truth, and was sure that the servant had betrayed her, and she could not bear to think that anyone lived who was more beautiful than she was. So she dressed herself up as an old peddler, and went her way over the hill to the place where the dwarfs dwelt. Then she knocked at the door, and cried, "Fine wares to sell." Snowdrop looked out at the window, and said, "Good day, good woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," she said, "laces and bobbins of all colors." "I will let the old lady in. She seems to be a very good sort of body," thought Snowdrop, as she ran down and unbolted the door. "Bless me," said the old woman, "how badly your stays are laced. Let, le- let me lace them up with one of my nice new laces." Snowdrop, Snowdrop did not dream of any mischief, so she stood before the old woman. But she set to work so nimbly, and pulled the lace so tight, that Snowdrop's breath was stopped, and she fell down as if she were dead. "There's an end to all thy beauty," said the spiteful queen, and went away home. In the evening, the seven dwarfs came home, and I need not say how grieved they were to see their faithful Snowdrop stretched out upon the ground, as if she were as if she was quite dead. However, they lifted her up, and when they found what ailed her, they cut the lace, and in a little time she began to breathe, and very soon came to life again. Then they said, "The old woman was the queen herself. Take care another time, and let no one in when we are away." When the queen got home, she went straight to her glass, and spoke to it as before, but to her great grief it still said, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land, but over the hills, in the greenwood shade, where the seven dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the blood ran cold in her heart, with spite and malice, to see that Snowdrop still lived, and she dressed herself up again, but in quite another dress from the one day she wore before. And she took with her a poisoned comb. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked at the door, and cried, "Fine wares to sell." But Snowdrop said, "I dare not let anyone in." Then the queen said, "Only look at my beautiful combs," and gave her the poisoned one. And it looked so pretty that she took it up and put it in her hair to try it. But the moment it touched her head, the poison was so powerful that she fell down senseless. "There you may lie," said the queen, and went her way. But by good luck the dwarfs came in very early that evening, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the ground, they thought what had happened, and soon found the poisoned comb. And when they took it away, she got well, and told them all that had passed, and they warned her once more not to open the door to anyone. Meantime, the queen went home to her glass, and she shook with rage when she read the very same answer as before. And she said, "Snowdrop shall die, if it costs me my life." So she went by herself into her chamber, and got ready a poisoned apple. The outside looked very rosy and tempting, but whoever tasted it was sure to die. Then she dressed herself up as a peasant's wife, and travelled over the hills to the dwarf's cottage, and knocked at the door. Hey, I cannot talk. But Snowdrop put her head out of the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in, for the dwarfs have told me not to." "Do as you please," said the old woman, "but at any rate take this pretty apple. I will give it to you." "No," said Snowdrop, "I dare not take it." "You silly girl," answered the other, "what are you afraid of? Do you think it is poisoned? Come, do you eat one part, and I will eat the other." Now the apple was so made up that one side was good, though the other side was poisoned. Then Snowdrop was very tempted to taste, for the apple looked so very nice, and when she saw the old woman eat, she could wait no longer. But she had scarcely put the piece into her mouth, when she fell down dead upon the ground. "This time nothing will save thee," said the queen, and she went home to her glass. And at last it said, "Thou, queen, art the fairest of all the fair." And then her wicked heart was glad, and as happy as such a heart could be. When evening came, and the dwarfs had gone home, they found Snowdrop lying on the ground. No breath came from her lips, and they were afraid that she was quite dead. They lifted her up, and combed her hair, and washed her face with wine and water. But all was in vain, for the little girl seemed quite dead. So they laid her down upon a bier, And all seven watched and bewailed her 3 whole days. And then they thought they would bury her, but her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it did while she was alive. So they said, "We will never bury her in the cold ground." And they made a coffin of glass, so that they might still look at her, and wrote upon it in golden letters what her name was, and that she was a king's daughter. And the coffin was set among the hills, and one of the dwarfs sat down by it and watched. And the birds of the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop. And first of all came an owl, and then a raven, and at last a dove, and sat by her side. And thus Snowdrop lay for a long, long time, and still only looked as though she was asleep. Sorry about that, got interrupted. For she was even now as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony. At last a prince came and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snowdrop, and read what was written in golden letters. Then he offered the dwarfs money, and prayed and besought them to let him take her away. But they said, "We will not part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pity on him, and gave him the coffin. But the moment he lifted it up to carry it home with him, the piece of apple fell from between her lips, and Snowdrop awoke, and said, "Where am I?" And the prince said, "Thou art safe with me." Then he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you far better than all the world. So come with me to my father's palace, and you shall be my wife." And Snowdrop consented, and went home with the prince, and everything was got ready with great pomp and splendor for their wedding. To the feast was asked, among the rest, Snowdrop's old enemy the queen, and as she was dressing herself in fine rich clothes, she looked in the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, lady, art loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new made queen." When she heard this, she started with rage, but her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she got there, and saw that it was no other than Snowdrop, who, as she thought, had been dead a long while, she choked with rage, and fell down and died. But Snowdrop and the prince lived and reigned happily over the land many, many years, and sometimes they went up into the mountains and paid a visit to the little dwarfs who had been so kind to Snowdrop in her time of need. So, excuse me. All right, sorry about that. So, that story differs quite a bit from the Disney version. Um, in this version, Snow White, or I guess Snowdrop, starts at the age of 7 in this story, but the story doesn't really tell how much time passes between when she met the dwarves and when the prince married her. So I don't know there. Um, More importantly, though, is the 3 murder attempts by the queen. Like, we do get the poisoned apple, but we also get her trying to choke Snow White and poison her with a comb, which Not sure how that one works. Anyway, from my understanding, there is another version of this which does have a far darker end for the queen, where she is forced to dance in red hot iron slippers. I mean, that's certainly a way to go, isn't it? Anyway, that's the first of our stories. Um, gonna take another swig of water here. So, talking about things unrelated to stories, I am still working. Yes, that is true. Um, so work has been a little bit quiet, which is not ideal because, less money means less money to pay bills and rent and all that. But I had to take my truck in to get repaired because its AC was no longer working and it was starting to get a bit warm. So I'm like, yeah, no, I need the AC. While I was there, I had them repair the front left brake because that was squealing like heck. But I got it back last week and it's been running fine until today when I go to press the brake pedal and it starts hissing and the brake feels incredibly heavy. Yeah, it turns out the brake booster is dying. Um, I mean, I had it replaced last year, but it shouldn't be gone that quickly. That's clearly a pick and pull part, so I've got to work on that a little bit. And by that I mean contact my local auto shop, have them order the part, and then have them put it in, right? Until then, I gotta fully slam my body against the darn brake pedal to stop. Alright. Anyway, that was the first tale. Next, we'll have Rapunzel. Because why not? Rapunzel's another good story. Um, I'm just remembering all the little fan theories about the film Tangled now. Anyway, oh gosh. I just looked ahead to Little Red Cap, and it starts in the most generic fairy tale way possible. Anyway, let's get on into it. So, Rapunzel. There once, sorry, there were once a man and a woman who had long in vain wished for a child. At length, the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house, from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared to go into it because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day the woman was standing by this window and looked down into the garden, when she saw a bed which was planted with the most beautiful rampion, Rapunzel. and it looked so fresh and green that she longed for it. She quite pined away and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some of the rampion, which is in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her, thought, "Sooner than let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself, let it cost what it will." At twilight he clambered down over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it, and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so very good, that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. If he was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again, but when he had clambered down the wall, he was terribly afraid, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," she said with an angry look, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "let mercy take the place of justice. I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. My wife saw your rampion from the window, and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not gotten some to eat." Then the, then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened, and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will take care for it like a mother." The man, in his terror, consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Rapun- Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress the enchantress shut her into a tower, which lay in a forest, and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had magnificent long hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then her hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. After a year or two, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son wanted to climb up to her, and looked for the door of the tower, but none was to be found. He rode home, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once, when he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that an enchantress came, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," said he, and the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Immediately the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man, such as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her quite like a friend, and told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Then Rapunzel lost her fear, and when he asked her if she would take him for her husband, and she saw that he was young and handsome, she thought, "He will love me more than old Dame Gothel does." And she said yes, and laid her hand in his. She said, "I will willingly go away with you, but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it, and when that is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress remarked nothing of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, Dame Gothel, how it happens that you are so much heavier for me to draw up than the young king's son. He is with me in a moment." "Ah, you wicked child!" cried the enchantress. "What do I hear you say? I thought I had separated you from all the world, and yet you have deceived me." In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them twice around her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip snap, they were cut off, and the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so pitiless that she took poor Rapunzel into a desert, where she had to live in great grief and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window, and when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous looks. "Aha!" she cried mockingly, "you would fetch your dearest, but the beautiful bird sits no longer singing in the nest. The cat has got it, and will scratch out your eyes as well. Rapunzel is lost to you. You will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered quite blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did not but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins to which she had given birth, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went towards it. And when he approached, Rapunzel knew him and fell on his neck and wept. Two of her tears wetted his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterwards, happy and contented. Okay, a few more differences here. So we did have mention of Dame Gothel as the enchantress, but Rapunzel in this tale is not a princess by birth. She is just a woman because there's no mention of king or queen or anything like that. Also, that seems like a standard trade. Take as much as you want, but you give me your firstborn child. That seems like the standard deal for evil witches, right? Um Also, Rapunzel's tears have healing properties here. So I guess there is a version of this where her hair is also magical, like in the film Tangled. But here, Dame Gothel receives no punishment, and Rapunzel has twins. Um, well, that's interesting. Sounds like the prince could not wait. Anyway, I think I like the film Tangled for a lot more now that I've read this one. Seems like aside from all the journeying stuff, I like the conflict with Mother Gothel in that one and how Rapunzel's tears heal Flynn from his wounds. I think they also make mention of this in the musical Into the Woods. Um, I haven't actually seen that one myself. I'll have to check that one out, won't I? Anyway, that was Rapunzel. Let's see what else. So we do still have Little Redcap. How long is that one? Not very long at all, actually. I may have to come up with something else to do for rest of stream, maybe. Because I do want to, like, continue this stream beyond what I initially planned. Let me just check my Steam page here. Is there anything that's, like, super quick? I mean, I'd also have to set everything up, wouldn't I? Alright, well, anyway. I don't have anything yet. We'll try and figure that out later, shall we? Anyway, continuing on. Little Redcap. Once upon a time, there was a dear little girl who was loved by everyone who looked at her, but most of all by her grandmother. And there was nothing that she would not have given to the child. Once she gave her a little cap of red velvet, which suited her so well that she would never wear anything else. So she was always called Little Redcap. One day her mother said to her, "Come, Little Redcap, here is a piece of cake and a bottle of wine. Take them to your grandmother. She is ill and weak, and they will do her good. Set out before it gets hot, and when you are going, walk nicely and quietly, and do not run off the path, or you will fall and break the bottle, and then your grandmother will get nothing. And when you go into her room, don't forget to say good morning, and don't peep into every corner before you do it." "I will take great care," said Little Redcap to her mother, and gave her hand on it. The grandmother lived out in the wood, half a league from the village, and just as Little Redcap entered the wood, a wolf met her. Redcap did not know what a wicked creature he was, and was not at all afraid of him. "Good day, Little Redcap," said he. "Thank you kindly, wolf. Whither away so early, Little Redcap?" "To my grandmother's." "What have you got in your apron?" "Cake and wine. Yesterday was baking day, so poor sick grandmother is to have something good, to make her stronger." "Where does your grandmother live, Little Redcap?" "A good quarter of a league farther on in the wood. Her house stands under the three large oak trees. The nut trees are just below. You surely must know it, repo- replied Little Redcap. The wolf thought to himself, what a tender young creature! What a nice plump mouthful! She will be better to eat than the old woman. I must act craftily, so as to catch both. So he walked for a short time by the side of Little Redcap, and then he said, see, Little Redcap, how pretty the flowers are about here. Why do you not look round? I believe, too, that you do not hear how sweetly the little birds are singing. You walk gravely along, as if you were going to school, while everything else out here in the wood is merry. Little Redcap raised her eyes, and when she saw the sunbeams dancing here and there through the trees, and pretty flowers growing everywhere, she thought, suppose I take my grandmother a fresh nosegay. That would please her too. It is so early in the day that I shall still get there good time. Man, I stumbled over that a lot. And so she ran from the path into the wood to look for flowers, and whenever she had picked one, she fancied that she saw a still prettier one further on, and ran after it, and got so deeper and so got deeper and deeper into the wood. Meanwhile, the wolf ran straight to the grandmother's house and knocked at the door. Who is there? Little Redcap, replied the wolf. She is bringing cake and wine. Open the door. Lift the latch, called out the grandmother. I am too weak and cannot get up. The wolf lifted the latch. The door sprang open, and without saying a word, he went straight to the grandmother's bed and devoured her. Then he put on her clothes, dressed himself in her cap, laid beside laid himself in bed, and drew the curtains. Little Redcap, however, had been running about picking flowers, and when she had gathered so many that she could carry no more, she remembered her grandmother, and set out on the way to her. She was surprised to find the cottage door standing open, and when she went into the room, she had such a strange feeling that she said to herself, oh dear, how uneasy I feel today, and at other times I like being with grandmother so much. She called out, good morning, but received no answer. So she went to the bed and drew back the curtains. There lay her grandmother, with her cap pulled far over her face, and looking very strange. Oh, grandmother, she said, what big ears you have! The better to hear you with, my child, was the reply. But, grandmother, what big eyes you have! The better to see you with, my dear. But, grandmother, what large hands you have! The better to hug you with. Oh, but, grandmother, what a terrible big mouth you have! The better to eat you with. And scarcely had the wolf said this, than with one bound he was out of bed and swallowed up Redcap. When the wolf had appeased his appetite, he lay down again in the bed, fell asleep, and began to snore very loud. The huntsman was just passing the house, and thought to himself, how the old woman is snoring. I must just see if she wants anything. So he went into the room, and when he came to the bed, he saw the wolf was lying in it. Do I find you here, you old sinner? Said he. I have long sought you. Then, just as he was going to fire at him, it occurred to him that the wolf might have devoured the grandmother, and that she might still be saved. So he did not fire, but took a pair of scissors and began to cut open the stomach of the sleeping wolf. When he had made 2 snips, he saw the little red cap shining, and then he made 2 snips more, and the little girl sprang out, crying, ah, how frightened I have been! How dark it was inside the wolf! And after that, the aged grandmother came out alive also, but scarcely able to breathe. Redcap, however, quickly fetched great stones with which they filled the wolf's belly, and when he awoke, he wanted to run away, but the stones were so heavy that he collapsed at once and fell dead. Then all three were delighted. The huntsman drew off the wolf's skin and went home with it. The grandmother ate the cake and drank the wine which Redcap had brought and revived. But Redcap thought to herself, "As long as I live, I will never by myself leave the path to run into the wood when my mother has forbidden me to do so." It also related that once, when Redcap was again taking cakes to the old grandmother, another wolf spoke to her and tried to entice her from the path. Redcap, however, was on her guard, and went straight forward on her way, and told her grandmother that she had met the wolf, and that she had said and that he had said good morning to her, but with such a wicked look in his eyes that if they had not been on the public road, she was certain he would have eaten her up. "Well," said the grandmother, "we will shut the door that he may not come in." Soon afterwards the wolf knocked, and cried, Open the door, grandmother. I am little Redcap, and I am bringing you some cakes." But they did not speak or open the door, so the greybeard stole twice or thrice around the house, and at last jumped on the roof, intending to wait until Redcap went home in the evening, and then to steal after her and devour her in the darkness. But the grandmother saw what was in his thoughts. In front of the house was a great stone trough, so she said to the child, "Take the pail, Redcap. I made some sausages yesterday, so carry the water in which I boiled them to the trough." Redcap carried until the great trough was quite full. Then the smell of sausages reached the wolf, and he sniffed and peeped down, and at last stretched out his neck as far as he could, so far that he could no longer keep his footing, and began to slip, and slipped down from the roof into the great trough, and was drowned. But Redcap went joyously home, and no one ever did anything to harm her again. Okay, so yeah, we all know Little Red Riding Hood's story. So there's not really too much here going on that's weird. There is the third line, "What big hands you have." That one's usually dropped in adaptations, I notice. Um, and then there were actually two wolves here. The first wolf, which did the devouring, and the second wolf, which the crafty grandmother had drowned. So that's interesting. Oh man, you know what I want to play? I want to play The Path, but I don't have my download for that. Ugh. Like, okay, so I don't know if anyone knows this. There was a game called The Path, and it's it was like a psychological horror. Oh, I could get it on Steam actually. $10. Oh, I could get The Graveyard as well. Anyway, the Path was a game where you're playing one of six Little Red Riding Hood characters, and the goal is to get the grandmother's house. But instead of just going straight there, that's the normal ending, the boring ending where you go and visit grandmother. You're supposed to go off the path and find each of the girls' wolves. And then there's this really trippy sequence in in the ending once you finally get to grandmother's house. And it's like one of those things where there's no actual dialogue told. You just have to try and figure out what they're doing. Um, let me. All right, there. That's done. Yeah, I did just buy it. Look, I did have a previous copy of it, but it was stored on a flash drive, and I have no idea where that is. But it's only $10, so why not, right? But I don't know if I'm going to be able to play that on stream. Let me just check. Um, oh geez, my dogs are barking out there. I so the path is kind of a game that's more of a watershed kind of thing because it hints at some stuff, but apparently it should be allowed on Twitch. I might have to set that up for another day. But my throat is getting a bit sore, so I think what I really need to do here is focus on maybe playing another game. One where I'm not quite so talking as much. Um, that shouldn't take too long. Oh, excuse me. You know, I got all this water, but it's not helping me out at all. And yes, it is actually water. It's not soda. But as far as what